Hey students, so in this video we are going to talk a bit about the editing process. Right now you're working on your narrative essay, or actually you've probably finished the first draft of it, and so now it is time to edit your way through. So, the editing process. The very first thing you should do is consider the big changes. The reason why is pretty practical. If you go and fix all the small things first, and then realize you need to make a big change, you're going to be writing big chunks of text that are new, and then you're going to have to go through and do the small changes again. So it's not as efficient for your time. So you want to focus on the big changes first, and then you can go through and edit the small things. So what are the big changes? So the first is, what is my subject? So is your subject too large, too small? Is it interesting? Is it fresh or informative? And this is actually something you'll probably start thinking about while you're writing, especially the idea is your subject too large or too small? So essays have min and maxes to them, and when you cannot hit the minimum, you know your subject is too small, and if you're exceeding the maximum by too much, you know that you've picked a topic that's too large, and so you need to better pick a topic that's going to fit with what you've been assigned. And so that's something to consider probably while you're writing. That way you don't have to totally change your topic after you're done writing. So keep that in mind. Next is, what is my thesis? Do I have a precise position on my subject? Have I stated that thesis in a single sentence? It can be more than one sentence. Do I see the difference between having a subject and having a thesis? So remember, in your introduction, and you're going to have a 2-paragraph introduction, or possibly more, but at the very end of your introduction, you should have a thesis. And it can be, say, a single sentence thesis. It might be 2 or 3 sentences. It will possibly have a semicolon. But you want to make sure that you have one, and that it's not just stating the subject. Remember, your thesis should state your position, what you're arguing, what you're trying to convince your audience of, and how you're going to convince your audience of that. And so make sure you have a thesis. What is my purpose? Why did I write this paper? Have I expressed my purpose in my thesis statement? Is everything in the paper related to that purpose? This is a really important one. When you get the feedback from teachers that say that you are going off topic, it's because you haven't edited for this part, point 3. Purpose. So the idea is that your thesis should clearly indicate the purpose of your essay, and then you should go through every topic sentence of every paragraph and make sure that topic sentence works back to that purpose. And as long as every topic sentence works back to that purpose, and as long as every paragraph sticks to what the topic sentence promised to do, you will have an on-topic essay. So if your essay is off topic, it's because you haven't clearly identified what your purpose is and then stuck to it. Number 4, whom do I imagine as my audience? Who will read this, and what do these people already know about the subject? Have I written the paper with that audience in mind? So sometimes when students overwrite, it's because they're explaining things too thoroughly for an audience that doesn't need that much background. You especially see this in the introduction with the background. Also, students sometimes underwrite where their audience needs more information, and they don't provide that, and therefore the audience gets confused. So consider who your audience is, me, and exactly what it is that you would need to share background-wise for me to understand what your topic is about. How is my paper structured? Have I followed the advice on structure? Is the organization of my paper clear and inevitable? Can it be outlined easily? Have I provided enough examples and detail? So remember that we're no longer doing the basic 5-paragraph essay. You now have sections within your essay, and within those sections you have multiple paragraphs, and they're of a variety of lengths, and they have a variety of organizational tools. And so You really want to pay attention to how you've structured your essay. Each section should have a clear transition between it. Every paragraph should have a clear topic sentence. Just like we did all these practices where we reverse outlined other students' essays, your essay should be something that we can also clearly reverse outline and see a clear organizational process. If you're not sure if you've succeeded in that, you might try reverse outlining your own essay or asking someone to do it for you. Another thing is, and this is quite important for a narrative essay, have you provided enough examples? Have you provided enough details? There should be descriptions. There should be anecdotes. If you haven't really done this, then your narrative is going to fall flat because it won't have enough to it for your readers to really feel as though they understand your story and where you're coming from. So those are the big changes that I suggest that you go through. You should ask yourself these 5 questions and really look into the essay to see if you've achieved them. Now, if you're doing this essay with someone else or someone else's, you should use the advice of other people. Sometimes it's really hard to see the errors in our own ways, especially because you just wrote this essay and it's still so fresh. So I would strongly suggest using peer editing, where you ask a peer to go through these 5 questions in your essay and ask them to be honest. I would strongly suggest that because they'll probably catch more things than you might. So use your peers, use my office hours. Please feel free to come to me with very specific questions, please. Don't ask me, hey, can you read this whole thing and tell me what you think? Ask me about specific parts, so maybe you rely on peer editing first and then come to teacher office hours and ask me about specific parts of your essay for help. Also, you might make your parent or parents or some other family member feel needed and ask them for help. It actually probably make them very happy. And so some things to remember with advice of others: choose your subject carefully, making sure that you have a specific reason or purpose in mind for whatever you describe. Study or observe your subject. Try to see it or experience it in a fresh way. Gather details, make a list, use all your senses. Use your purpose as a way of deciding which details ought to be included and which should be excluded. Choose a pattern of organization to focus your reader's attention, and use precise, vivid nouns and verbs as well as adjectives and adverbs to create your description. So these 5 points are actually 5 points that I got from a chapter of a book that's actually about narrative essay writing. So if you're looking for another thing to ask for your editors to do, you can say, hey, can you go through these 5 points and see if I've done this? You could also ask them to go through these 5 points. You might ask one person to do this and another person to do this so that you can get a variety of responses, but ask for help. Make sure to do that. All right, next is putting your paper aside. So after you've gotten this help and you've made some edits, you do need a little distance from your essay. Even just 24 hours will make a huge difference. So please make sure not to wait till the very last minute to finish writing your essay, because you need at least a 24-hour break from it if you're going to catch the smaller errors. Those are really hard to find. And so some of the smaller things you might look for: are there enough examples? Is your essay too short? If yes, provide more illustrations and examples to support your claim. Is your essay too long? Narrow your scope. Delete, delete, delete. And the really hard part, if you haven't distanced yourself from your essay, is editing for rhetoric, literary devices, diction, and your sentence structure, syntax. So you should have style to your essay, just like the essays and books and short stories and poems that we read. Just like those authors have style, you too are an author, and you too should have style. And so I should specifically see instances in your essay where you're utilizing rhetoric, where you're utilizing literary devices, where you have specific diction, where you've used the syntax that we'll actually go over later on. And I'm actually going to ask for you to highlight or comment or somehow indicate where you've done intentional instances of syntax and rhetorical or literary devices. So you'll actually mark these in your essay when you're doing the editing process to be like, yep, see, I used it here. So be prepared for that, because you're going to have to comment on those and let me know that where you actually use them. So a question that I get a lot is an error-free essay an A paper? So the idea is you don't have any spelling errors, you don't have any comma errors, no grammar errors, no punctuation errors, it's error-free. That's not always going to be an A paper. You can have a paper that has 0 editing errors, but it hasn't done all the other things we talked about: thesis, purpose, audience, syntax, diction, literary devices, rhetoric, all of that also goes into it being an A paper. That being said, having an error-free paper is important because it elevates your ethos. So if you want people to take you seriously as a writer, your stuff needs to be well written. So it is worth editing for spelling, grammar, punctuation, or asking someone to help you edit for those things because sometimes they're difficult to see. But it does elevate your ethos, so it plays a purpose in your essay doing well, but it is not the only aspect of an essay doing well. And I like to take a moment to make that point because sometimes this is the only thing that students edit for. They'll write an essay and they'll only edit for editing errors, and that is a very small part of what makes an essay good. So if you've always only edited for this step, there's more to the editing process. All right, so those are the steps to editing. Please make sure you take some time to do this. Please make sure to ask people for help because it makes the editing process a lot faster and more effective. And that's all I have to say about it. If you have any questions, please let me know, and hopefully I'll see you at office hours. All right, bye.